something right now, but I can't hear anything. I don't know if other people on Zoom can.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
The problem is that if the people in the room do not have their microphones on, you won't hear them talking.
Okay.
And we haven't been talking, so.
Okay, good.
We're just a
wanted to make
quiet
sure.
group. We're just a quiet group.
It's on, the stop?
Yeah.
The stop is on or off?
Yeah, that's on.
Oh, it is, okay.
It's mute, so you don't need to.
Hear me heavy breathing.
That's
Your little thing will glow, so it'll show.
Oh, yeah.
Push that means you're live.
Okay.
Lydia, you're going to drive your...
Okay, I think we're going to get started here. I'm going to call the meeting of the Redevelopment Authority of City of Stoughton Wednesday, May 10th to order. We've done a roll call. We have a verification of quorum and certification of compliance with open meeting law. We'll start out by public comments. I don't think we have anybody here in, but any comments, any public comments from anybody online? Hearing none, we will move into communications. And looks like we're going to have an update from True North regarding the remediation of public works. Who's going to be?
That's actually just...
Is that in the doc? Is that Rodney's
that's the
memo?
email.
Okay,
and
yep.
That's the only update we have. We're working on it.
Okay, Rodney's not online, so.
No, he wasn't planning on attending.
Right. Okay.
It was just more that you're aware that the process is continuing.
Okay. So everybody can refer back to the minutes that's in the packet or the email from Rodney That's in your pack. I would say if you have any comments, then you could probably get a hold of Rodney. Okay, then we'll run into number 6, elections of chair and vice chair. Just so you all remember, we do this annually. We'll open the floor for nomination of the president. We'll vote on that. The president then will take over, or the chair will take over, and then the chair will run the election of the vice president, and then the rest of the meeting. Does that sound functional? I will open up the floor for nominations.
This is Dave Plymers of the RDA, and I'd like to nominate Pete Manley as chair of the RDA.
All right.
I'll second that.
We have Pete Manley in nomination for the chair. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Is there any other nominations? Hearing none. We will vote on that. All those in favor of...
You need to ask once more. You have to ask 3 times.
Yeah, it's Robert's
Okay,
rules.
we'll ask one more time. Any other nominations? Hearing none. We'll move on to the vote. All those in favor of Pete Manley for chair, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Pete, you are alive.
Thank you. I'll call immediately for nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Lucas Troe.
Lucas is nominated for vice chair. Do we have
Second.
anyone else? Do we need a second for that?
Yep,
Oh, calling for a second.
I got a second.
Yep. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none.
One more time.
Hearing none. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? There are none. All in favor of Lucas taking the role of vice chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It is unanimous. Lucas, congratulations.
Congratulations, Lucas.
We have reports and minutes to approve coming up, but we also have some people perhaps online and that are waiting for the presentation, for Lydia's presentation. And I wonder if we could reschedule our commission business for after her presentation, so that if anyone wanted to just enjoy her presentation and not have to listen to our approval of the minutes, they could do so. Dave, is there a problem with that? The members agree to it. Does anyone object to that?
No.
Nope, we're good. Then, Lydia, you have the floor.
And Lydia, a reminder to turn on your microphone so the audience can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so tonight I will be presenting to you all my final capstone project for the Depot Hill Framework Plan. So tonight I will briefly cover some of the information that we've already seen thus far, being the inventory and analysis side of things, and then I will jump into the design solutions that I've come up with during this second semester. So you all know me, I'm Lydia. It's been nice coming to these meetings over the course of this year and getting to know you all too. Um, so, ooh, again, we're all familiar with Stoughton, a smaller community outside of Madison. Throughout spending time in Stoughton and getting to know the community through the course of this capstone project, I've noticed a lot of strong community culture in Stoughton, especially as it relates to Norwegian culture and history, the arts and entertainment, and then also business and innovation. So these are key areas that I wanted to target and include in my capstone project. So we're all familiar with the project site. This is the Depot Hill project site just north of the future riverfront development area. The primary concerns of the site include blight and vacancies, a lack of connectivity both like locally and regionally, safety concerns due to a lack of pedestrian infrastructure, and an overlooked or like unofficial historic district. So some of the goals that were established to sort of combat those primary concerns include promoting local and regional connectivity, increasing the amount of public space throughout the district, incorporating new mixed-use spaces to support growth, highlighting this like unique and overlooked history, and then expanding the arts and entertainment district. Throughout this process, I've researched historic and cultural preservation, which gave me some strategies that I'll be using to achieve the framework goals. So just an overview of the site analysis, some of the key points. The site has a really rich history, being the former economic center of Stoughton dating back to the 1880s, home to over 15 tobacco warehouses at one point, as well as 2 passenger rail depots. This map shows highlighted in red structures that are still present on the site today. I took a look at the architecture along East Main Street, finding a lot of great historic value, especially within some of the tobacco warehouses that are still standing today. The existing infrastructure is a great range from thriving businesses and also some vacancies, including 2 art galleries. So just summarizing some of the key constraints of the site, this includes the poor facade or streetscape conditions, the intersections, and the big issue of blight. However, the vacancies really leave good opportunities for reuse and infill, especially within historic structures. Moving on to the designs that I created based on this analysis. So using my research on historic and cultural preservation, I came up with some strategies to achieve the goals, including a Main Street enhancement, removing non-historic structures, using historic guidelines, and developing new uses to sort of tie to past uses. So this is the resulting framework plan that I created for Depot Hill. The north half of the site includes a large prairie landscape, which is called Rail Yard Park, a hotel and grocery store, as well as a new public plaza called Bunad Plaza. The south half of the site shows 6th Street, which is transformed into a dining strip. The space behind the Laurette is converted to an event space and parking structure. There's a new play space outside of the youth center, as well as a new train station. My overall approach to creating this framework plan was to start by using the bike path to sort of tie together the site, connecting the Cooper's Causeway to the new riverfront development area. The overall plan proposes almost 6 acres of new public green space. And then I also focused on key development areas and a complete streetscape redesign. So breaking down the framework into some systems, you can see sort of the difference between the proposed structures in blue and then the existing structures in red, sort of showing also the structures that were removed. Parking, I was able to enhance existing parking lots and also add a few parking lots for sort of the new development that I'm creating, as well as creating a 3-story parking structure to support event spaces and the new train station. I was able to greatly increase the canopy cover, especially along East Main Street, which will serve as sort of a traffic calming, but also will provide shade and make the street more walkable. This kind of summarizes the different uses of the buildings that I am proposing, adding a bunch of new dining options, a proposed building for a makerspace, a hotel and grocery store, and then as well as some other development areas. I will take a closer look at key elements of this framework, first by looking at those that pertain to the Arts and Entertainment District, and then those relating to culture and history. So first, for the Arts and Entertainment District framework elements, the first being Artist Alley. This is sort of a gateway between East Main Street and the new proposed park, but it is the space adjacent to Able Art Gallery, and it will serve as a public extension of that gallery, including areas for sculpture and murals. The second Arts and Entertainment framework element is the 6th Street Dining Strip, which will feature outdoor eating areas, a bunch of new restaurants, and then a unique lighting setting that will sort of create a unique vibe of the dining strip. The next is a parking structure and event space. The space behind the Lazaret has been transformed into a secondary event space by creating a 2-story parking structure sort of built into the slope of the site. The top of the parking structure is where the secondary indoor event space is, and an outdoor event space will slope down to the existing Lazaret. The sloping landscape will be picturesque and perfect for wedding photos or just as a extension of the event space. The parking of the Lazaret will be moved into the parking structure, but there will be a drop-off area and handicap spots right by the building. Moving on to the elements relating to culture and history, the first being Rail Yard Park. As I mentioned, this is a prairie landscape with biking and walking trails lined with historic markers and artifacts that tell the industrial history of Stoughton, or of Depot Hill. And then the other elements include a warehouse-style mixed-use development project, a hotel and grocery store, and then a passenger rail depot. These elements relate to culture and history by creating a historical connection. The hotel and grocery store are both things that were found in the Depot Hill project site throughout history. So recreating them sort of creates that connection, but also informs new uses. And then the warehouse style mixed use development refers to sort of the landmark or the key historic architectural style found on the site, to sort of inform the design of new mixed-use development, so both housing, retail, and whatnot. So this just kind of summarizes the transformation from the existing site to the framework. I will next zoom in on my focus site, which I chose to be Bunad Plaza, the entryway into the Rail Yard Park. The inspiration of Bunad Plaza comes from textiles, both from the traditional Norwegian textiles of the Bunad, as well as the cultural textiles of the Ho-Chunk as they lived in Stoughton before the Norwegian immigrants came. So taking a look at both textile styles, I was inspired and used that as inspiration for the arrangement of my seating areas and the layout of the paths in this plaza, as well as the streetscape mural just directly adjacent to the site. The site also features bike racks, signage and wayfinding, a boardwalk, and a historic districts kiosk and restroom. So here you can see the signage and sort of how entering Bunad Plaza would be for users, the view from East Main Street, and a better look at the historic kiosk and restroom. The kiosk and restroom is inspired by Nordic, medieval Nordic architecture, and sort of would be a landmark feature in this area because it would really stand out by being so different. I was originally designing this with 6 sides, one for each historic district in Stoughton, but then I realized it was going to be quite large, so I made it a bit bigger and added a restroom and utility closet as well as some drinking fountains on the side. Each seating area is lined with Gabion walls to sort of enclose the space, not completely, but partially. And this is just a detailed view of that Gabion and how it relates to the porous paving that is next to it. Next, I'll be taking a look. This section sort of cuts through that white line in the background, shows how the park has has terrace walls down to the paved walking path and the dry detention basin areas. So this just sort of captures the relationship between those spaces. By creating those terrace landscapes, those terrace walls, I was able to really reduce the slope of the site, which helps with runoff. I used 3 main strategies to reduce the amount of runoff on the site, including reducing the slope, including porous pavement, and then using native planting plans and dry basins. And I was able to reduce the runoff rate by about half. So now just taking a look at the details of the wall, they are Versalock concrete unit retaining walls, and this just sort of shows the filtration systems behind each. In order to create the terrace landscape, I utilized a lot of cut in order to fill in the back part of the landscape and make things a lot more, a lot less steep. This shows the planting plan for Bernard Plaza, which features a lot of native prairie grass mixes, but I also was able to introduce 2 variants of Norway spruce, sort of to create a further cultural connection. And this just sort of summarizes the strategies and then the outcomes. By using historic and cultural preservation strategies, I was able to create a design that promotes cultural and heritage tourism, captures the uniqueness of Depot Hill's history, and highlights, that history that was kind of overlooked. And with that, thank you, and are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Lydia?
I just want to give you a praise. This is for undergraduate project and presentation. Well done. I mean, this is a lot of work, and I'm inspired. I want this to happen.
Yeah.
So now we just have to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that. I've been judging engineering school capstone projects for quite a few years, and honestly, yours has blown them away. Most of what I see, this is really a tremendous project, and all the factors that you considered, runoff, cut and fill. You could be an engineering student, so well done.
Thanks.
Be aware that as we continue that, we'll be using your comments and suggestions not just as inspiration, but also we'll be going back to them many times. Many of us have not done the kind of research that you've done. Well, none of us have done the kind of research you've done. And this is just a terrific presentation and a terrific document for us to use in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure Katrina might be sending out the written version, which goes into a little bit more detail as well.
A question on, I think you put in there a parking garage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you, anytime, and we've had this discussion here on different projects that we've had, in urban areas, space, parking, is always an issue.
Mm-hmm.
How many stalls did you have? How big is this lot? Because you have a boutique hotel on there, and a grocery store, and there's some dining, and
the parking structure is just like a 3 I basically mostly just designed the exterior of the parking structure. I just mostly, at the framework scale, I wasn't able to completely zoom in on details everywhere. So the parking structure is just sort of like a massing. I just was like a 3-story parking structure that was this big and this big, and I didn't really think necessarily about the spots inside. Yeah, but in my final document, I go into a little bit of my idea of phasing for this project. So I think the parking structure and like the train depot are like in like the final phase of the project. So I feel like the need for parking would kind of change by then, and then a big parking structure would kind of make more sense, or also that could be like judged at that point.
Good, because that was kind of, you've led into my next kind of question. Is this done in phases? You alluded to it.
Yeah. Phasing was kind of something that I kind of just had to kind of think about at the very end. So it's not something that was like thought about too much. But my general idea was starting with East Main Street improvements, especially because there will be a project there soon, or that the street is like being changed soon, and then focusing on like sort of just revamping the area by focusing on the Main Street part, then moving into the parks and open space, sort of creating that bike trail, the rail yard park, and maybe the youth center play area, and then sort of the thought would be that this area would sort of becoming a bustling area, and then it would be perfect to support a new housing project, the parking garage, and the rail or the train depot, like at that point.
Awesome. And to mirror everybody's, it'll be nice to utilize this as guidance as we move forward.
I have an observation and a question.
Okay.
So first of all, I really want to thank you for acknowledging the Native American component of our history. Not everyone thinks about that, and I'm so glad that you took a little moment of your research and thinking to integrate that into the Bunad Park. I think that's where I recall that being inserted. And by the way, Sitnamai's coming up.
Yeah, very soon.
So we hope you're going to come here and have some cream puffs and partake in some of the festivities.
That would be fun.
And to my question, since you've done some of the research for looking back in time and have seen what's there historically, one of the questions we always think about being the Redevelopment Authority is potential for hotspots for contamination and remediation needs. Based on your, I mean, I'm not expecting you to give building by building analysis here, but based on your instincts and what you saw and what you read into the record, do you have an instinct where the more likely bad spots would be, or the hot spots, so to speak?
Not necessarily. I know that there were a lot of warehouses on like the north half of the site, not so much like as much from my understanding. This is mostly an not a guess, but I think that it would. Okay, yeah, I think that it would be more of the north half where there. I can go back to this.
Because you mentioned there are a lot of tobacco warehouses there.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. This is. I'll go back to the map.
But
I'm just guessing that. Sorry, this map shows most of the warehouses being in the north half of East Main Street, but yeah, I don't know for sure. I do know that there is like currently a cap on the site that the auto body shop is. Sort of, yeah, where my mouse is here.
Right
There's
there,
like currently a cap
corner.
on that site because of some sort of contaminant. I think it's like a 3-foot cap required there.
thank you.
I have a question. When you, in the map that you have where the grocery store and hotel is, where's the road that leads to the back parking lot?
The entrance would be from Hillside Ave.
Okay.
Yeah. I also, I guess, might just like be humbling myself, but the hotel and grocery store would need a bit more work on to be very functional because of, if you think about like delivery times and building access. That's something that I started to explore because I really liked the way the two buildings fit together, and I liked having them both like, yeah, on the same property. Like I liked the way I had them arranged, but I think that would be something that would need to be developed a little bit further. My professors and I came up with the idea of having like a turntable for semis in the basement of the like hotel that would provide access to the grocery store. But yeah, if that's something that is you are all considering, just know that this idea is not perfect yet.
That's your graduates.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Questions from anybody online?
I do have one question. With the way that you've laid out the framework, I think it's great. I think there are a lot of good modern features that respond to the historic nature of who we are as Stoughton. But I wonder, when you're looking at it, how do you see areas being able to switch in place if necessary? What is your perspective on that, considering who knows if we do get public transit on the train in the future, which we don't have, and right now I'm not sure where we're at with that. But, you know, how do you see it being adaptable to what might be needs?
Yeah, I definitely think when I was first given this project, the whole like the whole Stone Trailers property wasn't even included in my like original project. So I think that this definitely could be done in any, I guess, piece. I think, yeah, I think that definitely the proposed location of the train station would require a new addition to the train, like a new track to be built. And if that was something that was going to be pursued, I know that there is like spurs off the train on the north half of the site, so the train station could be moved. Yeah, I definitely also see maybe Rail Yard Park being the event space rather than the space behind the Lodgerette. But I do think that like the approach to adding more storefronts and sort of unifying the storefronts along Main Street would be like a really good strategy, regardless of what necessarily goes in those buildings. Just to sort of create cohesion with the rest of downtown.
More questions? Not hearing any. Lydia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your presentation was the primary goal for tonight's meeting.
Awesome.
So
Oh, thank you.
we'll move on to the business of the RDA, which is going back to item number 7, our balance sheet. Dave, do you have comments to make? We have it on our screen in the packet. Yep.
To bring up, I put a few comments in red, but there was nothing I wanted to highlight. Any questions on either the balance sheet or the income statement?
Comments or questions regarding this?
I guess my question, I wasn't clear of what is our balance for the revolving loan going forward, if we're gonna do perhaps another, it's the 137?
Okay, if you're looking at the balance sheet, I gotta move this so I can see it. No. The line labeled primary checking revolving loan fund, 159,000 is the amount in checking. That is how much you can loan out right now. 137,000 is what is still owed to us, so you can't loan that out yet.
Okay, no, that's great. So if we're gonna, it was talked at council last night, because we're developing another revolving loan fund for all of the city of Stoughton from the American Rescue Plan money. And we thought we would kind of combine the educational materials and the amounts, what the criteria are in a bigger kind of marketing campaign. And so it's nice to know that we have 106,000 left to loan out again, plus the 200,000 for the rest of the city for small or other businesses. I just update you on that.
Other comments regarding, oh, excuse me. Were you finished? Oh, I'm sorry. I started to interrupt you. Other comments regarding the balance sheet? And Dave, again, the revenue and expenditures for the month. Comments or is there something you wanted to ask us, or is there comments you have to make regarding that?
I put my few comments in and read on it, and I guess I'll just open up the floor to if anybody has questions.
Questions regarding this for Dave or for the commission? Anybody from online? Hearing none, we'll move on to line number 8, the approval of the minutes from last month. Everyone has had these minutes, so we've had the opportunity to look them over. Is there anyone who'd like to discuss the minutes at all from last month? Make additions or comments regarding it? We have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion of the minutes from last month? Hearing none, we can vote on the approval of the minutes from last month. All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It appears unanimous that we will accept the minutes of last month. Number 10 is the chair report. The chair has been in office for 20 minutes and it doesn't have much to report. Nothing yet. So, nothing yet, surprisingly. Thank you very much for the confidence that you've shown by putting me here, and I'm honored to be here. That'll do it. Innovation Center update. Katrina was online. Also, Gary is right here. Who do we want to talk to?
Sure, I'll talk.
Good.
So not a ton of updates with the Innovation Center, but we have been busy presenting at, let's see, in the last month we presented, well, we were at the Community Expo, which was really great, talking to a lot of community members. And we presented we hosted the Chamber Lunch and Learn in April. And gave a presentation there, and that was really great. And we presented to the school board on May 1st, and then we are slated to present at the city council on May 23rd. So have been busy with that, and have launched our sort of 3 initial programs around doing guided whiteboard sessions, expanding programming in the Fab Lab, and creating a program around mentorship, networking, connecting to resources, and providing technical support for entrepreneurs and makers or artists in the community that want to start businesses. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and there's more to come soon.
Regina, do you have a question for? Oh, I'm sorry. Questions for Katrina at all? Katrina, thank you for that.
I have a question.
Oh, here we
Katrina, how has it been received? So you've given all these presentations. Have you gotten a lot of support? Were there a lot of concerns, or what was the general speak?
Yeah, I think it's overall it has been received well. I think the biggest thing is that there is still some, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but we are still sort of narrowing in on and really determining what our value proposition is and exactly how we are talking about these programs. And since we are still so new and we're like just launching these things and just getting started, I think it's people are still trying to understand, as we are as well, trying to understand exactly who we are and what we do and sort of like tangibly what does it look like. So I think that's the biggest challenge right now. But hopefully once we actually start sort of getting some of these programs going and getting out in the community more and talking more about it, it'll become clearer.
Katrina, is there a timetable that is established for summer and fall events or program starts, or kind of how the rest of the year is going to come together?
Yeah, so we are working on really solidifying that right now, but in terms of the programming we're launching with, we're in the process of piloting a few of these different workshops with a few local organizations before we start sort of taking more, I guess, requests for actually doing these workshops and starting to charge for them. So we're in the process of working out details and scheduling some initial pilots of those. We're coordinating, since the Fab Lab is within the high school, we have to wait until or we're deciding to wait until the end of the school year to really expand on that programming and utilize that space. So hopefully summer is when the expanded Fab Lab programming will get off the ground. And then the entrepreneur events, I'm hoping to connect it with the revolving loan fund sort of informational session that Lucas and I are going to be working on that we'll put together. And then I'm in the process of getting a few speakers lined up to do some kind of informational sessions. So hopefully very soon that will happen. And then kind of before the end of the year, we're also going to be really exploring, and depending on how these initial programs go, we're going to be further sort of researching and defining our like physical space needs and continuing to explore potential either temporary or more permanent options for locations. And then we have a couple of other programs that are still in the works that we'll be launching as well very soon. So yeah, so I think summer for sure is kind of the strong timeline for a lot of this.
Other questions for Katrina? Katrina, thank you for that, for your comments and information. It's always helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to new business. Item A, discussion and possible action regarding update for Yahara Riverfront Development regarding changes to project funding. I see Kurt Brink hiding in the back. He's not hiding, he's just invisible to me from the podium. Kurt, would you like to find your way to a microphone? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
These are new microphones. You push the button once and it turns red, and that means you're on.
Ah. I'm going to use her laptop and do what she did. When we were here last month, we talked about the feasible way for the project moving forward would be condominiums. And to come back and report from our end as we analyze it, is it feasible? Do we feel it's feasible moving forward? And we do feel it's feasible moving forward on it. The units will be priced between $240,000 to $575,000. Just finished with the marketing team again this afternoon. It's in line where things are selling. Stoughton's been a good market. Of course, as you know, there's not a lot of availability of product. Pricing was up in 21-22, 15%, and it's up another 6% this year. So it's a steady market. The other positive of Stoughton is that, of course, the location down there on Riverfront, you do have a downtown like you were talking about, and it does have an identity, but it isn't that far away. As you think of other towns around the area, there is really no discernible downtown. There may be a mall or something else. So from our point, and then as we're finishing upgrading all the pricing based on a condominium, because we're even going higher end on our insulation, our soundproofing and everything else, how we construct the building. We're on apartments today to try to back it in to make it work. You go more wood frame, etc. But here we have to have the quality and the concrete floors that are wood floors as we go up through the building. And it is so critical that if it moves forward, the first units that people move into, that the quality is high and the soundproofing is high and the energy is efficient. So from our point of view and my team, it is something to keep moving forward to it, and that's what we'll do from our end on that, to finalize out the pricing. But there is a market. The lending environment on it is critical. It basically came about after the fiascos in 2008, which is good for condos, is you do a 50% pre-sale before you move forward. But that's also gives strength to the people in the area that the project is moving forward. It's solid and everything else. So it's been pretty positive from that end. There isn't a lot of condo product out there at all, and mainly because people are worried about the pre-sales. So there isn't a lot of product. There's a lot of apartments being built right now, but our point of view and one of our new buildings going to, where we're too low on rents here, the rents have gotten too high in Madison. We're really afraid where on paper there may be the comps, there may be everything else, but you can't be to where small efficiency is $1,500, even though that's the cost. We're worried there's going to be a saturation. So roundabout, we think it is solid. We think we've got a good product. And from our end, it's worth me to have everybody moving forward from that point of view. And then would come, if you want me to keep moving forward, I would come back in a month with more specifics and what I think my timeline would be moving forward. You know, how long would I need to get the pre-sales, work through that? Critical path-wise, it becomes really interesting with architects and the contractor, because when you're working through the pre-sale, you've got to really set up for the when you start the footings, when you bring in your floors and everything else. So we'll have that more detailed also. Condos are unknown. Sales, the resales or any condominiums that come up in Madison within a range do not stay on the market very long at all. And land development, to bring in new houses, is so difficult and it's such hard work. Which you probably have read nationally, is that it's just hard to get any new product out there. Land development from that end, and I'm involved in some on the far west side, the entitlements, the stormwater, the agreements, that's all great, but how do we get that house in there? So we think this is something worth moving forward on. And I'm glad there's a way to move forward on it to where, as we looked and we analyzed from the apartments and where the rents were, and when we lost the interest rate advantage, I think we end up with a better product here and a more stable for the community. We have 18 ones, 29 twos, and 31 threes. And I converted way back from the beginning of threes, and that came back from that initial meeting we had in the fire station, as I mentioned before. if you remember, there were one or two people says, I want to find a house in Stoughton, but I have a son and daughter, I can't find a 3-bedroom apartment. I'd like to be in Stoughton. And there's one or two other friends of mine that know their kids are gone, they live in Stoughton, but they don't want to go live on Monroe Street. So I think we've got an alternative here and keeping the quality of the project. And of course, as you know, we evolved the design as a group through to where it was the quality and everything else. So it's more than this what we've done. But I was just talking to some people dealing with city on some other projects. If it doesn't make sense on the back of the envelope, it's not worth going forward. Well, it does make sense on the back of the envelope, and it's worth moving forward and improving the other details. So that's where we're at right now.
Kurt, I have a question. What was that? You said the price was starting at what?
240,000 to 575.
575?
Yeah. Because part of what I had to say to the team and what the cost, I said, I've got to have one where I'm not going to stay in it. And it shocks us all. You want to be from 120 to 375, but it's not there.
So 575 for a 3-bedroom.
3-bedroom, 1,500 square feet.
Okay, so it was 18 one-bedroom, 21.
18 ones, 29 twos, and 31 threes. It should add up to 78. I don't
It does.
try to remember the right project, and I think this is what I got in here.
That's 78.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does.
Kurt, how do you see this? This is kind of different than what, in the direction we were heading before. So how do you see the timeline on this? I mean, before we had an agreement at some point, we'd go to closing, you'd buy the land, you'd start digging, those kind of things. It's a little bit different because you're looking for pre-sales, but I think the RDA is probably going to look for a timeline that says beginning and end of this pre-sale kind of thing. I would assume at some point. How do you see this
Well,
arrangement?
that was very clear before, because it was easier before when we were approved on February 28th. We were just, when interest rates were still 4% the year before last, and we could predict it. Then by the time we got the soil management agreement back in June, it was different. That is what we're working on, because finally, through this last month, got the word that there is, I can get the units appraised for that. That was the critical part, that we can do that. So now what I've got to work back through is working with it. How long, because as I was telling the marketing team, I'm going to have to give some type of specific range to where there's a pre-sales or there's no pre-sales to projects done, you move forward. So I'm going to work on that now, and to work through that, and then because I've got another thing, because of the way I'm bringing in the quality of the flooring, the planking of the plank for the floor instead of wood frame, I've got them set to where do I back that out when they're delivered. So that is a critical question. I think was made very clear before. If there was any development agreement contract, there have to be some things here that were that you don't meet those, there's no deal at all. But from my end, so I'll put that together. I don't know, but I'll be more specific because it's very critical to us to do that too.
Kurt, Roger here. It sounds like, if I'm hearing your words, that one of the main updates, or let's say things that you'll be looking to do with the upgrade towards the condominiums, is extra soundproofing and insulation. Did I hear that correctly or not?
There's a thing done in some of the major cities, and it's where we actually come in. And I had it priced that way before. It's where that building comes in. I did it on the extension to the hotel for Hotel Indigo, because I had the old section, then I had the new section. And so what I've got the solid concrete planks between the floors. And then you put your insulation in, depends on what the finish they want for carpeting, and then we actually insulate underneath the concrete because I am residential. I'm not going to just spray it out. But then again, when we have the outside walls are coming in, and those are solid concrete walls, then the bricks on the outside, and from that, we've got, that gives us outside soundproofing. Then from the interior, we'll probably do metal studs the way it is there because we have more predictability in pricing from that. Now, there's another point that I'm working on right now. My first condos I ever built was in the early 80s. The first phase started, then the interest rates went to 18%, and nothing was built in Dane County for a year. But what I did on those, their soundproofing for the walls is really critical. And we test a lot of things out because you got STC ratings, which is a sound rating, but there's called an impact rating also. So if somebody bangs up against the wall, you're going to hear it in the other room. So in STCs and sound ratings are different materials on either side. So the way I did those was 2x6, 2x6 with a fireproofing wall in between. Normally that isn't there, but I carried that fireproofing wall, which is normally a 5/8 drywall. Then you have the insulation 6-inch sections on the inside, but then what you call is put a resilient channel in, and that's a horizontal channel that the drywall hangs out on because it gives a different barrier. Then on one side, we're checking that out. You put the 2 layers of drywall on the one side, and the other side you put the soundproof in that. Okay, that's all great, but now where the sound comes through is in the bathrooms, because you got this 2x6 thing running up, but then you got the pipes and the drains and the vents where you can't put the insulation in there. And so what I did on that, I put another 2x6 wall into it. So here's your solid wall that comes all the way through the building. And then inside that is running the pipe through. That's different than trying to have a common thing there, but you know, because I know so this is the 80s, I told them, come back later on, here's the key to the other unit, put a boom box in. And so that's what we're doing, because I know that works. But that's part of what you can do if you're doing a condo, because if it costs this much more, it's so critical it's done. Because you probably heard things that have happened with a mess and somebody moves in the unit, you spend a fortune, and all of a sudden you hear everybody next to you, and there's no way of repairing that at all. So that's how it is, and it's done from how I've done it before that works. But the real key that made the difference was the back-to-back bathrooms to where that works. Now, there's another thing that if we look at lines up, there's another thing you can do in the kitchens to where you have your wall come through, then you put another wall with a 6-inch barrier and you put it into where apartments get too expensive. So that is so critical, because if we're successful and the first units get in, and it doesn't, you're not going to sell another 150 units, which is critical to the tax base and everything we're going to do. And like you were talking about the retail, if all of a sudden we got 500 people living down there, the beauty of that site is you're driving home by that retail. You're not going out the suburbs trying to come down here, and then you can walk up at night back to it. You've got that whole part there, which is critical. So went back and how we penalize them, plus then the construction is exact to it. So that's how we'll go about it, and I can do it with condo. But then all of a sudden, if I've always looked at it, that every $1,000 you spend is a positive $1,000 to the quality. If somebody on the interior wants to put gold leaf thing, that's fine, but the bones over there. Now, the biggest other thing we're working on is how do we control the energy costs? And as we did before, we're bringing in the line to put the solar in, but can we do, if it's condo and stuff, can we put the solar in right away to that? Now in Madison, we're working, because we have on West Washington Avenue, we have a 150 unit that we bought in '97 that's across from the Triangle. There is grants for the geothermal. And the geothermal is, if there's certain grants that come out for that, it may be worth it to put into the project. We didn't. Now, we've just started that because we couldn't do that. And but there's sometimes when you go for a grant, they have certain requirements on it to where all of a sudden your labor costs and you have to bring in interns and pay full things, it doesn't pay. So we're looking at, because it's very important that we do everything we can do in the beginning for energy costs, because there's other projects in the past that, you go put in baseboard heating, it's real cheap, but then it costs you a fortune to be in there. And of course, every unit has their own washer and dryer, and then how the heating system goes into, do we independent units, or do we do a dual loop hot water heat? What's the most efficient and best for everybody? So now we're looking at all those issues into there. So soundproofing is critical. Energy costs are really huge, because that really comes to, as people go in and try to qualify, if they can say my energy cost is this, that helps them with the percentages when they're qualifying.
Wouldn't with all that extra insulation and also make the condos more efficient because you have so much, there's less air
Yeah.
escape, and it'd be solid with respect to heating and all that?
Virginia, you hit it on the head, because I had a problem when it was doing the Indigo Hotel, because of the federal tax credits. I had to keep that inside brick wall there for it. And then so what we had to do, and I'll get to your question. So I was able to, by the Department of Interior, fill the cavity in between the roof thing with a certain type of a caulking that did it. But yes, how the walls are being designed, it's a solid, like block concrete wall on the outside that prevents any infiltration, because the most dangerous thing is, you say, any little air getting into it, going around it. So you have that, and it is really tight. But then from that point of view, it is really critical that your makeup air and your circulation is proper also. Things before, we're always thinking of putting in gas stoves, but you don't even worry about even doing that anymore. But that also, but when you did put in the gas stoves, you had to have the fresh air and the clean air and the makeup air on that. So just not doing that anymore. You go to the inspection. So I think this can really show tight. And we're building up the outside R ratings, impact ratings, and then how do you work your windows? And then there's a thing, how do you put in between that? Can you put the proper quilts and stuff? Can you build it all where it's cost efficient? And then it makes a difference in summer, it makes a difference in winter, et cetera. So that's where we're at, because it is really important that when the first phase happens, that everybody says, we know we got a good looking building. Well, we want to know people in there say, hey, this is really good, I like this, and then we'll critique it. If we go to do another building, what would we do different and make it better? So that's how we got it together.
Kurt, I guess I have a question when you talk about those phases. When you talk about the two separate buildings.
It would all go in at once.
Okay.
All 78 would go in once.
So in essence, you'll need 39 units sold
Right.
in advance.
But I think,
Because can they be split between the two buildings?
well, the trick is on the lending, it's the secondary market on the mortgages. It would be up to a lender to say, we're going to hold these in-house, but they can't sell off the secondary market until there's at least 50% pre-sold. Plus, you don't want to be sitting there with a risk, because we're not renting them, of what it is. I think, if it's going to go, it'll go fast. And we can't build it into, because if you remember the way we designed, because of the site, we got the two parking garages working together. And I can't do the A1 building, or what we call the blacksmith building, then come back and shut it off and come back into it. So I would love to be able to do that, but as right now, because of our grades and everything we're setting, can't. But I think we'll be okay.
Do you see this being a regional market? I mean, I can imagine that you're thinking, how big of a net do I have to throw to get 50%? Do you have a sense of how big the net's got to be thrown out?
Well, the thing is, what's unique about Stoughton, that I keep forgetting, I live in Madison, you have a lot of areas, it'll be the Madison area, et cetera, and everything else. We checked, we based the pricing, can we do it in the Stoughton area, but when you look at the availability of things, yes, we'll go as wide a range as we can. But once it gets out there, that this is a product and this is what it is. And another thing that's really critical, that as the project goes through, and none of us want it, the project not to go forward if you see it going forward, the people will qualify for the mortgage when they go in. This isn't just, I'm putting a few $1,000s, I'm gonna have a reservation. You go through, you're committed, do you want this, how do you go through it? And that keeps the momentum going from there. And then if we're fortunate enough to do this, then the momentum's there for the rest of the phases also. Yeah.
A couple questions, Kurt. The big message that I heard from you tonight is you've come to the conclusion that doing the project as a condominium project is it's feasible, it's a viable way to proceed.
Right.
Can you help me understand, how did you come to that conclusion? To what extent is that just looking at a financial pro forma? To what extent is that based on a market analysis?
Right. The marketing team went through, and I went through it again. Can we get the prices we have to get? Is the market there for it? I mean, because it's like the problem I had coming in on the apartments were 165, 175 per square foot in Stoughton. That sets my value for the appraisal. For Masson, it might be 3 is too high. So if I'm selling from 240 to 575, is there comparable to them sold within that sets the value? So that value being set, can I construct it, do the fees, and have a profit stuff? That is a goal now.
What I'm hearing is that, if you've concluded that you can construct the units that your financial pro forma shows you can build the units,
Yes.
and if you can sell them in that range,
Right.
then the project works financially, and you also believe, based on your market research, that you think you'll be able to sell at those prices. Am I fairly summarizing?
You're right, but a caveat to this, everybody thinks you can't sell condos. I mean, nobody's doing them. And we talked to other marketing, other guys in real estate. You can't put them, you need 50% pre-sale and everything, but because nobody's doing it. But in this case here, it's like another one I'll be moving forward, Madison. The building's design is put together and everything else. I really believe in it now, and I think we'll surprise everybody. Really, really do. So yes.
Couple more questions. So when you said it, when you come back next, you'll be able to talk about the timeline.
Correct.
And here are the things that I'm thinking may be part of that timeline, and I'm just wondering if you can give me some insight. So one of the, you all right, Kurt? You need?
Yeah, I got to get a pen.
Yeah. I got one if you need one. What color do you like? No, it's just, if that one doesn't work, let me know. That one should work. That's just a red pen.
Okay.
All right, so I'm trying to get a sense of what all has to go into the timeline. And
Right.
Here's what I'm thinking, and I'm wondering if I'm on target or not. So it sounds like you're doing some redesign work.
Well,
Is that still ongoing?
it's a good
or-
question. The design work for the exterior and everything is done
Yep.
and based on apartments, which is nice, and the GDP and SIP are approved. So I'm not changing anything there. What I'm doing is I'm only enhancing the interiors and the walls and everything else. Nothing on the exterior, anything else is changing. The unit mix isn't changing, and the parking is staying the same. So everything in the GDP, SIP has stayed the same. So that's done.
Yep.
Where we're just enhancing and upgrading the price to go to this higher quality interior and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate that refinement that you're doing inside is going to have any impact on you needing to revisit the financial pro forma, or is that, do you feel like?
I think I'm okay on it now. The big price I had to wait back for was my concrete panelized walls, because when I had it done before, when it was expensive, they, Spancrete merged with Wells, and they had to interface the software. And when they come out with the price on that, everything is, they come out with a full 3D model. It builds up how everything goes through and everything's engineered. So that's what I had to know. That price is set and locked in, which is better than me trying to go out and just frame it and put up and deal with wood commodities and everything else. So I think we're okay. If I adjust it, it's because of something I did quality-wise for it.
So what I'm hearing there is that you think you know enough about cost, so
Yes.
you're not expecting that the ongoing tweaking on design is going to cause a material change to your pro forma.
That's a good question, because before we were looking at apartments, we were trying to figure out, I had to keep that in for the blacksmith building because I can't go hardy board siding on that. Then I tried to say, what happens if I put no, all the brick, everything stays the way that we all approved it. So there, for the design, landscape, and everything else, parking, there's no amendment to the GDB SIP for that, and there's no change in Unimix. It is amazing when you're out there. Everybody says we need more units, go more studios and one bedrooms. We're trying to create a community with families here that can move to Stoughton. So to answer your question, nothing is, where it went through, and I just got that price back yesterday where it's in the models to build and stuff, because that's all engineered. That whole structure is all done and engineered. When I go back through to go get the state, we got to figure out some working drawings between the architect, but all that's done.
Okay. Another question. So, one of the reasons that we've gone through, I guess the main reason we've gone through this rethinking about how to move forward this project is that in late last year, there was a recognition that there was a gap financially. The project wasn't going to work. It was $4, $5, $6 million gap.
Right.
So I'm hearing tonight that if the project moves forward with the condominium approach that you're describing, and based on all the information you've just kind of summarized, that gap has been eliminated. Is that
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely. The gap's been eliminated. The other factor that really helps out from the other point of view, where we have the TIF for the roads, the water and sewer and the stormwater, we have a higher value there to cover that back when you look at that payback model too. Because as we run that model, we're not running at 4% anymore. We're running at 6%, even because more favorable from that point of view.
So you're saying that from your perspective, you think the project is going to generate higher assessed value and generate
From where the apartments would assess that to where this is at, this is basically $12 million more.
12 million more
Yes.
in assessed value?
Yes, because I was limited to what we couldn't build, to the assessed value where it was before based on those rents and the expense ratio. This is based on the sales of the units. The way I look at it right now is about $12 million higher.
I did some quick math, and I'm putting it just under 34 million.
Okay.
Based on 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. Kurt, tell me if this is right, but about 383 square foot.
You're right. We're 380, just right in there, and that's where it is now. Because
So,
if it came back that the market was at 250, can't do it. We're building apartments for that now. But yes.
Okay. So next, all right, so I'm hearing the timeline is not going to show a need for any significant redesign, no entitlement changes. You think your financial pro forma is basically set now, so that we don't have to build into this timeline time for any of those things to happen, is what I'm hearing.
No,
Okay.
because what we've got now is we worked the last month. I had the other critical, my number to get the quality kind of building I wanted. Now we just fill in everything from there. But yes, that's just going online. But as right now, unless this works feasible. My biggest factor was the market for which you have to charge square footage wise. Is that there? Is it achievable? And I got a total thumbs up.
So the main thing that the timeline is going to need to address, it sounds like to me, is how much time do you think we should allow for you to complete the process of pre-sales
That's critical.
and get to the point where we know this project is viable or not?
And not sit out there, like you were saying, and everybody's saying, we're not sitting out for 3 years. Do you need 6 months? Do you need a year? Or what, or yes, that's the critical thing, and how do we build that up?
So you think that you'll have an answer to what you think that looks like when we meet next?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the goal, to be here. Do I have something that I think to move forward with? Then the other big thing, now that I know that, then it's building, how do I assume we're gonna get the pre-sales and market it? And there is, then it's engaging the right lender, how to do with it, because they'll set the criteria and going through that. And then we would have to come back and do the condominium documents and everything else.
Yeah, so let's talk about the documents, the agreements that we had in place that would need to be updated and revised to reflect this new approach. Would you expect to come back with your suggested revisions at the next meeting, or were you also here to talk about timeline, or do you think that you wouldn't be ready for that yet?
I probably wouldn't be ready. I'd probably be close where we would know what it is, so the next time I come back, because then it'll be set. And at least well, Dan's a good attorney on drafting that, working back and forth. But then I think we can be pretty specific to what kind of exhibits to match that. So we'll pretty well know what it's gonna be, but we can have the document pretty well in front of you by the time after that.
So
Can I step in for just
Yep,
a second?
yep.
Last month, one of the things that we discussed was a 2 meetings out. This meeting tonight, when we were hoping that you would be here and hoping you would say exactly what you're saying tonight. So good for us and good for you, and we're glad to see that. And that the next meeting would be with your, we'll call it your team, financial, legal, and architectural people, to describe more detail, and we had the possibility of that being as soon as 2 weeks from now, a special meeting. Also a possibility that it would be at the next monthly meeting, a month from now. And this goes exactly to what Matt is asking. Now you've had the time, and you are here tonight telling us exactly what we want to hear, and I'm delighted to hear it. Where do you see the next meeting occurring with your people, possibly, rather than just yourself, but with your people? And would we be able to wrap our arms around some of the questions, including the very important question of how long it's going to take to pre-sell?
Yes. I would say it'd be a month from now, the next meeting. I wouldn't be ready in 2 weeks.
Okay.
It took me longer to really lock in this quality piece of the project. I had to have that price locked in. So I come back to the next meeting, would have the marketing team explain how we'll go about it, all the timelines and everything else for what we're gonna do.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Go
So-
ahead.
That's a critical question.
Right, and so what I'm hearing though is that we're about a month away from that meeting with the timeline discussion.
Right.
And your explanation as to why that timeline makes sense.
Yes.
But then we're talking another month after that before we're looking at acting on a new set of agreements unless there's a way for you to
Or
move that.
if we're ready, we could, like we just said, maybe we could do a special meeting to that effect, because we need that to be in place from that. But a lot will happen in this next month, where I think the rest will happen pretty fast.
Is it possible, Kurt, to direct your team, including Dan, to say, hey, let's get those agreements going now as well, so we can maybe even be ready at the next meeting with the contracts? Is that okay from your perspective, or is that?
Well, what we can do to follow along, we can have everything then, and maybe there's an exhibit or two we have to add on, because it'd be better at the next meeting, like you say, oh, we're looking through this, we're critiquing, editing it from that point. I can work towards that goal, yes.
What, I need you all to know that my schedule in June is going to be pretty wacky. I'm going to be gone basically the second, third, and fourth week of June. So what would the next meeting be? What date are we looking at? And that would be a Wednesday? Yeah, so I think I'm at a conference that week, but let me just double check. I might ask whether we could, well, yeah, I'm wondering if we could make that the 13th. We probably have a city council meeting the 13th. No, is that?
Yes, we do,
Or the 12th?
unless the RDA meets at, say, 3 o'clock or something on the 13th.
Yeah, because I will be unavailable from like the morning of the 14th and through the rest of the month of June.
So having before it is critical.
Well,
Monday the 12th.
the Monday the 12th, I'm available. And so, you know, it's just a question of, I don't know how much we can get accomplished between now and, say, the 12th or the 13th of June, but if we can get to the point where, you know, that we can have the timeline completed and everyone hopefully reach agreement on the timeline and also revised contracts, then we can get that step behind us.
Another thing that I think of making it simpler here that really held us before, but at least we have the soil management agreement, there is no need to go after a brownfield grant. It's just part of the cost of the project.
It'll just be folded into.
I tell you, the brain damage in that, the $500,000 that I got on East Washington, which was critical, but by the time I'm done with it, verifying everything and then paying you guys back, and because you have to be very detailed, it'll hold us back so much. It's part of a construction project that comes out. It's different if you're doing apartments and you need it to bring your debt down. There's no need that remediation part is part of it here, because before all we had, I'll have what comes in the tip part, but that brownfield part, we're just wasting time and that'll hold us up completely.
Yeah.
So the point is here is we've got the soil management, but to work through that, and then who's hiring Valchef or who's not hiring Valchef.
Well, I mean, Valchef's work is all done, at least in terms, we got an approved materials management plan, remediation plan. Now, there's still going to have to be documentation during the project, right? And the way the current agreements are structured,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Chris Valchek. So it's not quite approved yet.
Oh, okay, well,
Well, we're getting there.
I thought we were done.
Oh, boy, they're changing rules
They're talking
right now.
about working on the DPW site at the same time.
Well, so I guess the question is, Kurt, either we really push hard in the next month and we got a month to try and be ready to maybe get those steps behind us, or we're going to be delayed until we're into July.
You hit the point with the answers that I just got back this week, which has always helped to have a deadline, because I told everybody, I said, I have a meeting Wednesday and I have to have a price and I have to be secured with that. And so now, I agree, pushing hard this next month, so when we come in here, it's easy to critique a draft, but if you don't know what the draft is, you don't know what you're critiquing. So yes, we'll be ready for it. I'll talk to Dan tomorrow. And then we'll now we're moving forward on the critical path for the construction. It's just the sales part we're unknown on. We'll try to have some predictability there.
Well, I mean, if we can move that quickly at this stage on getting ready for that June 12, June 13 timeframe, and that's great. Then I'll feel much better when I'm gone in June.
Dave, what's our, the June 12th Monday, what else is scheduled for that time? Regina, did I hear you voice something about that?
No, that's a good time. This is a plan commission.
The 13th is not practical because of a city council meeting, but is the 12th, which is a Monday, moving it back 2 days.
And I would much prefer the 12th as well, because the 13th is just jam-packed for me already. Not only do I have the council meeting, I have other stuff earlier in the day.
It's like the classic, I'm leaving, everybody's got to get this stuff done, right?
Yeah.
So the 12th, that gives.
12th
is the planning commission at 6.
But they made it here, so we can go back to the.
Yeah, we could go back in the firehouse meeting place for this.
We're only here for the television.
Yes, of course. Kurt, would the 12th be practical for you?
Yes, it would be. The answers that I've got in the last month to make this move forward, I've already given that same guidelines to everybody else, but we work towards it, and Matt, I agree with you, it helps to have a draft of agreement, what we're going through and what people agree or don't agree to it also. And then as I was looking at the critical path, and I was looking at the brownfield part, it's just part of my financing other than the other stuff that's covered by that. Because that could hold us up, because that really, the soil management agreement really killed us on the other project. Because I don't know what's gonna change the interest rates or whatever it is. And
I mean, my sense is, maybe I'm wrong about this, my sense is that the agreements will not need to change a lot. The big change will be building this pre-sale process into it that has to be completed prior to closing and kind of making that part of the process. I think that's the only real major change.
Because I think when we really worked hard between here, city council, everything, all the other stuff, expansion, this, all that, had all been worked out and drafted and critiqued and everything else. So this thing here, where we had the hangups before, is like on the brownfield and all that. Plus, if I don't have that approval, I can't start construction because you've incurred costs before you've done that. So let's say we've got the soil management thing, but now I'm going through a brownfield agreement and everything else. It was $200,000, $200,000, but it's not worth the delays that we may have on this here.
And Dave, what you're showing me in terms of True North work, it looks to me like what they're looking at is re-looking at the numbers if the city wanted to just go ahead now with remediation work independent of the redevelopment project. Is that, or is he looking at, no, even if this remediation work is done by Kurt as part of that, we're reworking those numbers too? Or you're not sure?
My understanding, and Rodney would be the expert, is that they're looking to do both the RDA site and the DPW site at the same time.
All
remediation done at the same time.
So like the whole riverfront redevelopment site?
That's my understanding.
As part of phase one?
Yes.
Yeah, because the problem was, if nothing happened there, you've got this thing underneath with this phase one is with its bad soils, but where do you take it to? So you almost had to dig it out and put it back in and everything else, especially with getting the last thing in. So, because part of the soil management was you had to show where all your materials are going. So going through this will follow along what we need to do. What else was I going to say? But fortunately, that should work pretty straightforward.
Well, I mean...
And then we've also, another thing that's gone great is the city has Strand doing the engineering work for South Street and 4th Street right now. We gave all our CAD drawings for all our ground to tie in with Strand. John Thousen from Motai did. So all that pre-work is all being done right now also. Because that helps us, because we've got to go out for because of the TIF on the improvements, we got to go out for the 3 bids.
Well, I think that as part of the timeline discussion that we want to have in about a month, it would be a very good idea for Rodney and you and Chris Valchev to talk about how the environmental piece of this, and whether we need any approvals or changes to DNR approvals, how that fits into the timeline as well, because that has caused problems before.
Oh, now, when Chris did soil management, it was based on this phase one going in, so I think that's what he's doing now. The difficult part was, if that didn't go, how do you finish out the river walk and what he had to do? We have a simpler thing, but yes, you hit it on the head.
Yeah, well, we should at least check in with Rodney and Chris and Kurt and make sure we understand how that fits into that.
I'll give Rodney an update tomorrow what's occurred at the meeting today. I do know that Rodney next week is on vacation, but Thursday and Friday of this week, we can see if we can get a little bit more clear understanding.
Can they be at the 12th meeting? Maybe Rodney can't because of Plan Commission, but maybe True North, just to give us an overview.
I can bring that up to see if they'd be interested.
I think the question I would have is, if there is in fact ongoing work that requires changes and additional DNR approvals for the project, we need to understand what that is and what the timeline is for that and know how that fits into this. And that'll have to be part of the contingencies that we build into the agreements as well. Because before I had checked that off, like, oh, we're done. We got the remediation and the soil management plan done, but I'm hearing maybe it's not done. Okay.
Well, what they're doing there, they got the okay, they got the okay from the DNR that says, we approve your overall soil management plan.
Yeah.
Then you go back and when you're gonna move forward, here's your last specific. I got my last phase on MOTS. So I have my whole soil management and I'm going through the approval of that last phase. And basically what you're saying and what you're doing, they wanna know where all the dirt's going.
So
That's
that has to have, even after they've approved the plans, you're saying there's some more granular detail that they need to.
Yeah, it's, you gotta prove the whole thing. Then you come back and say, all right, we're gonna follow the whole thing, but this is what we're gonna be doing on this one thing, but still meeting the guidelines of the whole thing.
Well, I just want to make sure we all understand, whether we've got what we need to move forward or there's still more work to do.
That's a good question.
Yeah, okay.
Answer all those questions.
Comments, questions, discussion?
Oh, you gotta put your mic on.
Sorry, folks. Other comments, questions for Kurt or discussion in general? Anybody online? Kurt, thank you for your presence here tonight. It's much appreciated. Your comments are much appreciated. We're delighted to see the project go ahead.
And I know I'm a bad boy if I miss a meeting if it's not ready. You've already explained that to me.
It'll just be awful. It'll just be awful.
No,
Thank you for being here, and we look forward to next month. We understand that putting a crush schedule among your people is difficult. Well, we're asking you to do that difficulty, and
that's fine.
everything that Matt said, I would like to reiterate that he speaks for the commission very much. That any comments about moving the project forward is extremely important to all of us at this time. I think you know that already.
Well, no,
I'm telling you something you already
know.
know.
I think that's always very critical because is that the documents, that's the Bible, it guides everything, and that's what is very critical because that's how we go back to how everything is. And that's why the other document was so complete, but like you said, man, a lot of the other stuff is worked out. Now it's specifically based on this. And one thing that's helped us on normally approval delays is that we are the GDB SIP and we've kept the exact same building and so we're just enhancing the quality on the inside. But yes, I do totally agree with you because that document is very critical to everything else. And that's also why from my side, I have the right attorney that understands that and is thorough on that.
And you know how this goes, Kurt. In order for us to be ready for a June 12th presentation here, that means the lawyers have to be happy with the agreements about a week or so before that meeting.
I know.
Yeah. So we really got about 2 weeks to get this.
I understand it.
Stuff.
Well, I'm just glad that there is the feasibility of, on paper, the marketability of the units. So that helps to go forward. Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here. We look
And-
forward to seeing you next month.
All righty. And may you have a good career in your life.
Thank you.
Moving on, discussion possible action regarding the elder's invoice for Brink Development pro forma review. Dave, what is it that we need to address and act upon on this?
Don't leave yet, Kurt.
The invoice is for $75.75, and as long as Mr. Brink is here, I just wanted to verify whether you still intend to pay half that invoice. $7,575. I do not remember the original numbers.
I'm paying half. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because I watch costs like that. Oh, I don't pay half. We went to our incentive base, it doesn't work this way. So basically, they were doing is verifying where the rents were what. That's all. And I'm not thinking of you, but you know, billable hours, that's a lot.
No, but.
I'd be happy to pay for it, but I'd like to see a breakdown in how.
Yeah, so Kurt, the understanding was it would be a 50/50 cost share. I understand it's a little more than what I thought, it's more than what I expected as well, but I would also say that the process was not what I expected. I mean, it took longer, there was more back and forth. Are you okay with a 50/50 cost share on it, is what I'm hearing, even though you,
But I just want to see how they get broken down.
yeah,
Because
we'll get you the
the fact
invoices.
that it did verify where we were. I know, I did, Jill said that. But I would, look at my projects, do it. Every cent that you do in every change order makes sense. So it just seems like a lot of money for what we got. We're verifying, you're just saying, okay, if Madison is East rents this or that rent, and it, I'll pay half of it, but, that's fine. It'd be nice if we could just see a detail down, and what I mean is to where, how do they bill by the hour, or it's just a gross contract? So, other than that, I'm fine. Sorry to go off my tangent there.
No, that's all right. We'll make sure that you get the invoice, so you have it, and then we appreciate, you know, your willingness to cost share on it. I mean, that was the understanding. I agree with you, costs when they go more than what you're expecting is always difficult.
I don't mind
Yeah,
if they're
yeah.
gonna show it there, but it did prove the point that that's where the rents were, so it did accomplish that role.
Well, from my perspective, it was critical in confirming for the RDA and the city council
Yeah.
that indeed we need to rethink how we're proceeding here because it wasn't working. And having that independent assessment of that, I think, was pretty helpful. Yeah.
Well, that's fine. So, okay. Other than that, I'll be a good boy. Bye-bye. Anything else you need? Okay.
Thanks for being here. Okay, moving on to old business discussion and possible action regarding Depot Hill. Of course, we had a wonderful presentation on Depot Hill. Is there other people who want to discuss something very specific regarding this?
I don't have anything specific being new to the RDA, but I will say, hearing that presentation, seeing the things that we want to do in the downtown district, as a newer resident in Stoughton, as someone who wants to see and grow a family in time and then have those types of areas are important. To see that development happen is very important. It's a huge, enticing piece to this city if it were to exist. So Depot Hill being reconstructed and changed in that way, honoring the history, but creating new opportunities there with what you can do downtown, tying that into the historical district, I think it's great. And I think we should be looking at those areas to create a very uniform experience. Well, not uniform experience, a unique experience that brings people to Stoughton, not just on those festival days that we have. So I just want to emphasize I think it is very important that we look at these areas.
I like hearing those words. I think we all do. Gary?
Yeah, and so the RDA is in the process of preparing a redevelopment plan, a formal document for this area. And it's been kind of on hold because we were anticipating Lydia's fine work here that we saw tonight. But I think now that we have that, we can be thinking about what elements of Lydia's plan we want to formally include in the RDA's redevelopment plan for that area. And we can keep that on the agenda and have that, carry that conversation forward over the rest of this year, I think, and hopefully have it wrapped up by the end of the year.
I really agree about keeping it on the agenda, and I think that several of us, perhaps all of us, will want to take a very close look at your report, which we have on paper, so that we can look at it very closely, just to address exactly that and to start setting priorities and scheduling thoughts. I don't want to say scheduling yet. It's a little, but thoughts about what kind of timeline we might be thinking about. Yeah, I agree a lot. The pathway, the steps that have to be taken, once we've looked over Lydia's document in detail and have each of our own opinions, the pathway that has to be taken will be relying quite a bit on you for that. You'll be telling us which steps we need to take. Well, that's fine. We've done that in the past. That works out great. I guess I'm just repeating what you just said.
Hey, Pete, I just realized that DJ doesn't know everybody here, and he's a new member.
I've taken some small introductions over the course, so I will continue that following the end of the meeting.
I know you know that Gary and Katrina are part of our #1 consulting firm that helps us on this. I just wanted.
I spoke to Gary a little bit on that as we started. Yeah.
I was just going, wow, we haven't even talked to you about who everybody is, and we just like made you jump right in and made you vote, and.
I'll tell you, this isn't the fastest onboarding I've ever had, so it's fine.
Okay, good to know.
Well, welcome anyway.
Gary, I had a question for your thinking for the report that you'll be working towards. Are you foreseeing or anticipating public involvement or any kind of interaction before you start your writing and big picture thinking and collaboration stuff?
That's up to you guys. You know, if you want to build that in, I feel like we've reached out to property owners, and the next agenda item here, we can talk a little bit about that. You know, but involving the broader community, there will need to be a public hearing to formally approve a redevelopment plan. So that could be the formal public engagement, or we can have other exercises or other meetings before that happens.
So you weren't thinking of putting together another charrette like we did for the riverfront? I think that really helped. You know, maybe we didn't use the designs or whatever, but it got people engaged. I mean, and I think that's where it came out that at that time, I mean, how many years ago was that people really wanted condos, but we couldn't get any funding for it, so it's hilarious that that's where we're going now.
That's right, I love it.
And so just to get people excited about this, just like what DJ said, I think might serve our going forward and getting buy-in by community members. It might, you know, even though it might put us, you know, behind schedule, but it might cost us something, but in the end, it might gain a lot with community support.
Yeah, and we do have a proposal out to the Urban and Regional Planning at UW-Madison to conduct a charrette like that this fall. We haven't learned about, you know, I haven't heard anything recent about that and whether we're getting on the docket or not.
Yeah,
so that's kind of Katrina.
Yeah, so I kind of talked a little bit to someone at the university year program about that, and I'm not sure that will be able to happen with them, with UW-Madison. I think there's like someone's on sabbatical, and I don't think the timing will necessarily work out. So that's kind of a recent conversation that I had with someone about that.
Yeah, so then, that just mean, I mean, we were hoping to get that done for relatively low cost. You know, absent that, that would mean that, you know, the city would have to, or the RDA would have to come up with some funding to run the charrette or to have that done.
Gary, the other thing that we've used through Sustainable Stoughton and other organizations is, and I'm sure you have too in your career, is UW Extension's Community Outreach Division. Sharon Lesberg, and there's a couple others that I've worked with over the years. I think we could do kind of a lower level, or kind of, you know, whatever the highest level charrette is. Maybe we can't afford that now, but I think doing the community input for that area is really important, getting to what DJ said. Because when you looked at what Lydia had in her report tonight and what she's done for us over the many months, is that it's pretty clear that with some clear thinking and some good vision, that area can be pretty darn special for the whole community. So it's not just the landowners there or the building owners that are going to benefit by whatever we finally do. The community is going to benefit. And so the more they can see it as their place, the better off I think we all are.
Right.
So I would advocate for UW Extension.
Well, we've had
something like
they've
that.
been involved in these conversations, and they're part of the thing Katrina was talking about, that it's not going to work out.
Yeah, that's who it was someone
Sharon.
at UW Extension
Yeah, it
that
was Sharon.
they were saying that it probably, they wouldn't have openings until at least like the spring, next spring.
Yeah, and maybe even the following fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add, I think we need to be very, very cautious here. When we had the charrette on the riverfront, we own that property. We own no property in the Depot Hill area. So, you know, you're talking about telling somebody, these are the grand plans that we have for your property. And I think we did, you know, until we, you know, start to negotiate or work or hear their thoughts about saying, hey, you can tear this thing down. Hey, I want to sell. Hey, until we get to that point, I think we need to be very cautious on going public, out to the public, and getting ideas and getting people excited about something we have no input in at this point. I mean, that's just my concern.
Katrina, with that, you have been talking to a lot of these property owners. What are their thoughts with selling or?
Yeah, so I think my dad and Mike Connor have been the ones directly talking to most of some of the property owners that they've been able to get a hold of. And we can that leads us into kind of our next agenda item about some opportunities. But I know there are still a few that we haven't been able to get a hold of. There are, you know, there's one that isn't interested in, at least the last time I talked to them was probably close to a year ago now, I guess. So things might have changed, but they were content with how they were. But again, it wasn't, we weren't like proposing or asking if they were interested in selling or anything like that. It was just kind of an initial like asking how things were going and if they needed anything or had plans for relocating, or sort of a general discussion. And then more recently, within the last few months, again, I think my dad might have more info on that, and Mike Connor have reached out to a few property owners down there to specifically and more directly ask about their interests in or plans for the future. And a few of them are interested in seeing potential proposals, and it seems like would be interested in potentially selling, from what I understand.
Yeah, should we get into that agenda item at this point?
Sure. Why don't we blend that right into the next item, which I think that conversation needs to be directed by you at this point anyway.
Yep. So in your packet, there's a map, at least in the amended packet, at the end of the document is a map that we prepared that shows some of these conversations that we've been having, and or events or things that are underway that impact this area. And there are quite a few of them. Recently, we're aware that the owner of the IKI property, which is no longer active, is interested in proposals for what might be made of that property. There is a potential user that they're talking to from Stoughton that could use that, but they're in a negotiation phase. And that individual is also interested in looking at the Stoughton lumber property and potentially, if there's a big enough proposal, looking at assembling those parcels himself as the developer. So that's out there. It's kind of at this point, there's a long road between where we are now and that's something happening on that.
Gary, do we have any idea of our expectations regarding contamination of the IKI site?
I can tell you that I fully expect that site to have some contamination on it.
Okay. Yeah,
the property owner's position is, let's assume it's a clean site and give me a proposal assuming it's a clean site, and then we'll deal with it.
Okay.
So that's going to make it a little more difficult to move that one forward, I think.
Closer to the river.
Yep, by
Exactly
Cooper's
right.
Causeway, Ridge Street, back in there.
The furthest property of.
That's right.
Yep.
And technically, it's not part of East Main Street, but it does connect to
Right.
it.
That's where you want to get that bike path that
Right.
would kind of.
That's right. So between that and the owners of the Lajarette, they're interested in seeing more things happen down in that area, and they're open to what does that mean? So Able Gallery has more work they want to do.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'll clarify the lease, the owner of the business, the Lajarette, not the owner of the building.
I see.
Because the owner of the building is Stoughton Trailers.
Right.
So we're not sure. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Katrina. Well, why don't you talk about, some of these other ones are ones that you've been leading conversation on, especially along West Main Street and the main part of the downtown.
Yeah, so 211 South Water Street, for example, they're looking to potentially redevelop that building into some apartment units.
And now we're talking about the greater downtown and not just the East Main Street area.
Yeah. And let's see. What was-
211 Water is the Virtual Foundry building. It's an old auto dealer, and it's really interesting because they still have an internal ramp inside the building for when they put parked cars in the showroom on the second floor.
Oh, that's 211. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Also, though, there's enormous windows on the outside of that were covered over quite a few years ago, but they're still framed out. They still exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful building. Underneath, somewhere under there, there's a wonderful building.
Yeah, right.
And very heavily built.
Right. The owner is interested in, they think they can put 18 units in and maybe putting together a TIF request as we speak. Yeah, there's something that's likely to happen there, if it's feasible. Were you going to say something, Katrina?
Oh yeah, I was just saying, I think whoever, it might have been Regina that was just speaking. I couldn't hear because the microphone wasn't on, so.
Sorry.
That's okay, thank you. And then a few others that I had been talking to, a year ago, and we actually helped with putting a presentation for the ARPA funds to City Council back last August, I think. So I'm not sure, I haven't talked to them recently about where they're at with their projects, but there are a few of the potential Airbnbs or apartments on upper floors. The what used to be Elsing's, I'm not sure exactly how that's going, but I know the owner was looking for a potential commercial tenant on the first floor. And then the where the family dental, Stoughton Family Dental, I believe, that building, what address is that? I think it's on here somewhere.
That's the one that has those second and third floors up on top that
That's
are
exactly
vacant?
right. The vacant former
Yes, former hotel, yeah.
hotel, sort of, yeah.
That one's
Yep.
a beautiful building.
So I believe, and this I heard secondhand, not directly from the owner, but I heard that the owner is interested in keeping the building, but potentially redeveloping it into something.
We had an owner's rep for that building come to us, oh my, a long time ago, a year ago or more. They had just purchased the building. They were interested in what they could do, but the owner's reps seemed to know remarkably little about the building. Is it still the same owner? Excuse me.
I think
Yeah,
so.
it is.
It's owned by the dental company. Or the,
Oh, it
owns the
is.
dental. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't understand that.
So
Okay.
their primary focus is running their dental business,
Sure.
and they're able to afford the building with it empty, but it's just wasted space and not being used, so,
And is it the dentist who owns it?
yes.
Okay. Oh, I just met him the other day, so,
Oh,
okay. I know something I didn't know now.
yeah. And one of the other properties that's on here is the city's Public Works building, and Mayor Swadley suggested that could be on there, as there's some discussion about the future of that from
You're
the
talking
city's
about the
perspective.
utilities
Or
and
utilities,
EMS?
not Public Works, utilities.
Yeah, I was
building,
gonna say,
right.
that one has been demolished, but,
Right.
I think it's the EMS and utilities.
Utilities, that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's the one across. Uteroil.
Yep, so there are quite a few development things, related things going on in the downtown. A number of these are great prospects for the revolving loan fund. I mean, that's just the size of projects that they are that could fit in with that. Some of these are going to be a little bit bigger and, may need TIF. And in fact, we know that there's one TIF request that's being put together now. So this is all kind of heading up to potentially a discussion about TIF and how we might think about a new TIF district for the downtown.
And I'll just add about the revolving loan fund. Any one of these that I have talked to, I have made sure to tell about the revolving loan fund. So I'm not sure who all has followed up exactly on that, but I've made a point to tell everyone about it. So
Lucas.
at least this current revolving loan fund. Now that we're establishing a second one, it would be worth, and I know, again, Lucas and I are going to work on putting together more marketing around those.
Gary, you were just saying that we want to focus our attention on these questions that we were just discussing toward a possible creation of a new downtown tax increment district. Are you seeing that as we need to continue the discussion? We need to create the district to continue to discuss the discussion. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
we don't need to create the district to
That's right.
continue the discussion.
Good.
But with the expectation that there will soon, I don't know when, be a request in front of the city to create a new TIF district.
Okay, so we're heading in that direction.
So
but
we're heading in that direction. The RDA prepared a downtown plan a few years ago, and there's a lot of suggestions in there that could be improvements that could be paid for by the TIF district. And so there's those kinds of things that it helps to have a little time before brushes on to get the TIF district created, to think about some of these things, about what you'd like it to accomplish.
Good answer, thank you. Other discussion of that?
Gary, could you refresh my memory? I know at some point this past spring or maybe winter, we had, at least think I brought it up, and I think you already knew the answer, of course. Talked about the railroad corridor and the DOT's, I won't say control of it, but their interest in the use of that corridor. Is that something that would be represented in the potential new redevelopment plan, and any flexibility there would be on the part of DOT to be helpful with that area?
Well, DOT owns the land, but they lease the tracks to Wisconsin Southern. And so the lease is pretty much gives Wisconsin Southern exclusive use of the right-of-way, the tracks and the right-of-way. And it would be, so if you're thinking about gaining access to the right-of-way for like a bike trail or something like that, I think that's going to be tough, but we have a line of communications open with Wisconsin Southern, and we can bring that up and see how open they might be to it.
There was that narrow parcel that showed up on a map that's right in front of IKI. There's an old embedded, it's abandoned, there's an old track there. Is that part of IKI's property, or is that part, do we know what that's part of?
Yeah, that's part of IKI's property.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, they have two tracks. I mean, they have two tracks there right next to their building.
Okay.
How big is that? How big is that right away? I mean, how far does that, I mean, it has to be 10 feet from the center of the track?
I can't remember. I think it's more than 10 feet, maybe 15 or 20, but I don't have that number right on the top of my head.
And the other thing that's happening, isn't it that new cell tower going to, out in that vicinity,
Yep,
Gary?
in the very back end of the Viking warehouse property, it kind of comes to a point
Right.
at the end of that parcel. A triangular shaped parcel was carved out of the end, and that's being leased to a cell tower company. I don't know.
There'll have to be a road back to it of some sort, or a right-of-way, correct?
That's right. You have to maintain a right-of-way access to the cell tower.
And that's going to be undertaken next year then, or we don't know?
I think it's happening this year.
This
How
year,
far
yeah.
how far off of Main Street is that we're talking about?
It's
Confused about
probably 1,000 feet.
that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if, on this map, if you can see where that
Dave, could you-
point is, just on the,
Scroll to the first page where the map is.
oh yeah, there we go. So if we're on the north side of East Main and just west of the railroad tracks, there's a parcel that comes to a point. That's about where the cell tower is going to go.
There's an objection to that from Landmarks Commission. I saw that there was an objection to that. I have no idea where that objection went. Does anyone else know where that went? No. Okay.
That's close to the school then?
Yeah, very
It's-
close.
Yeah, I don't think the cell tower, well, it will be higher than the hill that the school is on, but I'm not sure it'll be higher than the school. Because it'll be down at the lowest level of that valley in
Is
there.
there anyone else in the room who finds that really objectionable? I do.
Well, and not only is that objectionable, but I mean, it seems against every bit of logic that they're picking one of the lowest points in the city to build a tower. You think you'd
Isn't
want it
that
on
true?
the highest point.
Apparently, it's the place in the city where it's needed the most in order to provide full coverage.
I'm sorry. I believe what you just said, but yeah, I don't buy it.
I don't know anything about it myself.
I don't either.
I think there's a proposal to put another cell tower like in Beyond Park too. That the cell company, and I don't know which company it is, but
I don't know if there's any other discussion. There was
Beyond Park makes more sense to me. I'm not crazy about it there either, but it makes more sense than where we're talking about.
Oh, I know. Why would you put it
A lot
in?
more.
I know in a lot of, I thought there was something, I know in a lot of places, like in Colorado and things, they make those things look to be like trees. Is that on the table
I
of
have
council?
not seen their proposal.
Okay,
and
so it's there, but not there yet.
Well, I don't know. I don't know where it's gonna come, if it's a that private property owner is leasing it out or sold it. I don't know how much
It's a
we actually
30-year
have
lease. It's a 30-year lease, I think.
Yeah, do we even have, the city even have a say over that?
I think you do. I think the city has to approve the location of those.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it come through. Dave, do you remember as it come through?
I think it went to planning last meeting.
Okay, and what did they say?
I can't remember if it was just they're coming in there to talk, but it does look like the tree kind of shape cell towers.
Okay.
Other discussion or questions for Gary, or other discussion of the downtown area?
I have a question, Gary. When you were talking about another TID, is it just gonna overlap on the existing TID 4, or because there's a TID 5 and a TID 8, and the TID 4 is the one that's going out, so it just take that same footprint, or are we gonna expand it, or?
It can be whatever shape you like. It doesn't have any relevance to TID 4 anymore. You know, the new TID it will be totally disassociated with TID number 4, and TID 4 will be dissolved. So there won't be an overlapping TIF situation with that. Now you could overlap other parcels that are currently in TID 5. But that would, whether or not you do that depends on how soon there might be a development project proposed for any of that area that would be in the new TIF. If there's a project that's going to happen relatively soon, then maybe it could run its life in TID 5 and help and benefit TID 5. But if it's going to be later, then it probably won't have that much benefit. It may make more sense for it to be in a new TID.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the properties on Water Street going south, where there's a lot of infill that might need to happen. I mean, there's some buildings that would be nice, and maybe,
Coming along the river on that side.
yeah,
right?
coming along the,
exactly.
and maybe even include Uniroyal in hopes that someday that they would like to move.
Yep.
That might be something to think about and discuss it.
So at some point, Gary, it sounds like there'd be a specific discussion then on the proposed or potential boundaries of a new TID then, is that correct?
Right.
Later
So-
this fall maybe? Or?
Yeah, so I think once, if you get a TIF, if the city gets a TIF request in, then there will be a discussion about, is it an appropriate TIF request? Is it something the city wants to participate in? Once you get to that decision, then you start talking about creating the TIF district. So there's some time in there.
Other questions or comments? Okay, future agenda items. Well, our next meeting will not be on the 14th, it'll be on the 12th. And that meeting may turn out to be dominated by our conversation with the Brink team. But these items that we have on the agenda for tonight, certainly the Depot Hill discussions and the downtown discussions that we've just been having, we certainly want to keep on the agenda, as Gary said. I would agree with that entirely. Anybody else want to make a comment about future agenda items?
Pete, I'm guessing we'd also still have our regular meeting on Wednesday of that week then, so we'd be Monday special meeting, then Wednesday regular meeting.
I wasn't thinking in those terms. Other people want to make a comment about that? Dave? You have anything to say about that? Oh,
You would
has
like
a-
just one.
he has a terrible look on his face.
Yeah, that doesn't look good at all.
You're talking 4 meetings in 3 days for some of us. That's going to be a lot.
I would think that rather than making it a special meeting and adding to it, that we would have our 12th meeting would be the 14th meeting. In other words, that we would skip the meeting on Wednesday the 14th. That's what I think. Other people in the room disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that. Less meetings are good.
Roger, do you do? I'm
No, that's
listening
fine.
to
I
your
think that was
comment.
my question. I was just,
It's a good
I couldn't
question. I
imagine
didn't
how
think
that
of
could
it.
happen. I wasn't voting for it, believe me.
Yeah, I've heard that before. No, that's a good question. I didn't think of it. Sure. The meeting of the 12th will replace the meeting of the 14th.
Okay, all right.
So we'll be meeting on the 12th and not on the 14th. Dave, that should make you happy. You're happy.
A little bit.
Yeah, he's happy-ish.
Pete, would some of that meeting, because of our negotiations, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen that night, maybe none of us do, but could we envision that being part of a closed discussion?
Yeah, what about that? If we're talking with the Brink crew, can we go into closed discussion, or I don't know what the protocol is for that.
Well, first of all, Matt's going to be the one who tells us whether it can be closed or not, but
Okay.
you don't go into closed sessions to negotiate with the other party.
That's it.
You go into closed sessions to talk about what you want to do in the negotiations.
And I don't foresee that on that night, because they'll be in the room, basically. I did think of that, and I don't foresee it. You agree?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it sounds like it's pro forma stuff or taking old stuff and kind of updating it, and so I don't see negotiation necessarily, at least with the developer per se.
That sounds like a conversation that needs to be had with
Maybe
Matt.
it might be worth having a conversation.
Well,
I
no,
agree.
I mean, well, like Dave said, if we're both in the room, it can't be a closed session.
No.
If we have them give their presentation and then we talked about the contract and it wasn't finalized and they left and we needed to discuss things that we wanted to add in for the next meeting or negotiate price or whatever that came up, then that would be going to a closed session when they're no longer
So
here.
it could occur. What we don't know is how that conversation is going to go on Monday night. We don't know where it's going to go when
Yeah,
those
well,
people
you
are
will
all
probably, I mean, if you touch base with Kurt the next week or two and with Matt, then you'll know probably what more is transpiring and probably able to make a better, more informed
And
agenda.
then we can be notified in when the agenda is sent out.
Yeah.
It may not hurt to have a closed session on the agenda in case it's needed.
In case it's needed, sure.
Again, I'm going to have to, Matt's the arbitrator on that one, whether it can go into closed or not, but I will talk to him about that.
I don't misunderstand that. Yes, I think that's a conversation.
It all depends on what's on the agenda.
Yep.
Anything that we have to decide, like cost or negotiation, that would be the closed session.
Any other comments about future agenda items? I'll call for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second.
Second.
Discussion of, we have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Discussion?
There is no discussion on that motion.
There is no discussion. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.